Hey everybody, and welcome to the check-in for the Glorious Dawn live quilt-along. I'm Angela Walters, and you've stumbled onto our live check-in where I'm just seeing how you're doing while we're making the Glorious Dawn quilt. But before we get started, you notice anything different behind me?
Hey everybody,
Normally, normally I'm actually behind or at my office filming the check-ins, but right now I'm in the middle of making new episodes of the Midnight Quilt Show. But that didn't mean I was going to stay away from our check-in, so we took a quick break so I could check in and see how you're doing. Great news, new episodes will be coming in November, and I'm excited about it. There's some really fun projects that we're working on. It's going to be great. But I digress. Right now, what's most important is the Glorious Dawn Quilt-Along. How are y'all doing? Hopefully you're having a fun time working on your Flying Dutchman blocks. I have another quilt option to show you here. So this is the third colorway that's available, Beautiful Botanicals, and there's that Flying Dutchman block. Now what's great about this pattern is the bigger quilts have bigger blocks, and you can see here the smaller quilts have the smaller size blocks. So you definitely want to make sure that you're checking out your pattern when you're cutting the sizes, or you're going to end up with something that's not quite how it's supposed to look. All right, so hopefully you haven't had any trouble with your Flying Dutchman blocks, but if you have, this is the time to ask. That's why we have the live check-ins, so that you can reach out to me and I can help you out if possible. Now, if you haven't got your kit yet, it's not too late because you can still get 50% off of it. So check the description box below for the links to that, and you can quilt along with us in one of 3 beautiful colorways. Now, as always, there's some questions that have already been asked on Facebook. We kind of populate some questions for people that can't be here for the live check-in. You know, work sometimes gets in the way. And so I'm going to go ahead and address those, but then I'll answer your questions as well. So if you have them, make sure you leave them below and I can get to them, because I think the funnest part is getting to interact with everybody here on the check-in. It looks like we've already had quite a few people saying hello. I just think it's so great that we can have so many different people from different areas all hang out. So it's a great time. We've got Ohio, California, snowy Colorado, Texas, and Karen says she's bad. She hasn't started yet. That brings up a great point. You can make this anytime you want. So you don't have to be quilting along right now. These check-ins will still be available to check out once you're ready to start quilting. So be sure to get your kit and then you can just take it as you want. All right, so if you've already made your Flying Dutchman blocks, let's see if there's been any questions about that. Let's see, one of the first questions says, where do I find instructions for the background fabric for the throw? I'm creating the Sea Spray colorway, that beautiful blue and green colorway. And I live on the Pacific coast, and that's coming from Marcella. And Marcella, I'll be to your house very shortly, and I'll talk you through that personally. The Pacific coast sounds amazing. It's been rainy and cold in Missouri, so I would love some sun. Anyway, you can find the digital pattern for this on your My Blueprint under the Materials tab. So when you log into your account, just go to the Materials tab and you can print it off, and it has all the instructions for the blocks as well as the background. This will also help you if you want to remake it using stash or using fabric out of your own stash. So the pattern will be there for you to find. But if you make it out of a different fabric, you'll have to post pictures because I would love to see it in some different options. So again, all the information, the actual lessons for the quilting along are on myblueprint.com. You'll log in over there and check it out on that point. So thanks for the question, Marcella. Another great question was, are there tutorials for making these quilts or just the Q&A live video? So that comes from Gail, and like I just said, that's over on My Blueprint. As great as the teachers I think I am, I'm feeling that these check-ins would not help you make the quilt. You're going to need the pattern and the actual lessons. So be sure to check those out. This is merely just me checking in with you, see how you're doing, and answer any questions that you might have. Oh, Cindy mentioned that she's making all 3 sizes. Wow, Cindy, way to, go for it. That's awesome. She bought a spectrum for your mom and a hydrangea and a queen. Oh, you'll have triplets. I love that. Very, very fun. And we also have Indianapolis and Virginia. Very good. Okay, so another question which I thought was great, it was from Elizabeth, is any tips for keeping all these half square triangles organized? They are everywhere. So there are a lot of half square triangles and other bits and pieces to this quilt. But what I love about the pattern writer is she took the time to pretty much make it very easy to keep it organized. Now, I will show you my handy dandy trick for organizing. It's nothing spectacular. In fact, you probably already have them sitting around your room. It's the Ziploc bags. That's right. I love the Ziploc bags. because they keep them all together. And I even have little Post-its in there. And I'm not an organized person in general, so, you know, having these does keep it handy. But I will tell you that the number one thing, I want a little zipper on it so I can keep my pieces in there. And I've kind of realized I'm a little bit of a snob when it comes to my Ziploc bags. I want a zipper on the top, and I don't want them much bigger than this, because if I have the bigger bags, I start cramming too much stuff in there. It's not very good. So just get some little baggies, keep them all together and keep them labeled. I promise in the beginning it seems like there's so much, but as you start making your blocks and assembling all those little pieces, it gets a lot easier. So definitely fun to have. Although, you know, when you're making the kids' lunches and they ask where the bags are, you have to admit, you know, they're in your quilting room. It might be good just to go ahead and get your own box. Just saying. So that was a great question. That was about the only option I had for my organizing. Let's see, from Camille. Now, Camille, I love you. She says, what are your kids being for Halloween this year? So what's fun about the live check-ins is if you're not having trouble, we still want you to check in and chat with us. This is like my little private quilty time with you. So my kids, my oldest son is almost 16. He thinks he's too cool for trick or treat, but you know what he's going to do, right? He's going to walk around and try to steal my candy because I'm not too old to trick or treat, so I'm doing it. My youngest daughter, Haley, is going to be a unicorn, and I have to admit I'm super excited about making the little furry leg warmers and doing her makeup. And I may have bought a lot of sparkle sequin stuff. Just saying, if there's extra, I might be a mommy unicorn. And then Chloe, my middle daughter, who you might see on an upcoming episode of Midnight Quilt Show, just saying, she wants to be an inflatable T-Rex. I don't know, maybe just interesting. Of course, last year she was a big hot dog, so she's always kind of marched to her own beat. So that's what we're all going to be. One of my favorite things about Halloween is we hand out candy outside our quilt shop. The whole downtown square does it. So I like to dress up and hand out there. So if you're in the Kansas City area, you should stop by. All right, let's see if there's any questions on here. When we finish the O block, is it okay to go ahead and sew them to the center finished blocks? So Tanya, great question. When it came to filming the Quilt-Along, we kind of divided it in blocks, and then we talked about putting it together. You can definitely assemble as you go. The benefit to that is that you don't lose track of any of your blocks. So her question is, when she gets it, can she go ahead and make her row? And I actually happen to have a row right here to show you what that'll look like. So even if you're a little bit ahead, you can kind of see what you're going to get. So there's our Flying Dutchman and our O block. If you haven't got to it yet, don't worry, we're not there yet, but you can kind of see how it goes together and that beautiful, beautiful color placement. So if you have already made your O blocks, you can definitely start putting them together so that you have it all in one bit. Those won't fit in your Ziploc baggie, but it's okay because now they're all together. You don't have to worry about losing it. Although I guess you could still lose it, but if you did, it'll be easier to find than one rogue half square triangle somewhere. Although, you know, the quickest way to find any of your quilt blocks is to remake it. Because as soon as you remake it, then you end up finding it. So that's how that kind of seems to happen. All right, so Kelly's curious, which pattern color have you chosen? I picked the Sea Spray, but now I wish I'd picked the black background, but I still love it. That's the problem, right? You have to select one colorway. I did the Spectrum because it had the solid fabrics. You could see the quilting, which we know is pretty important to me, but I want to show you what the black looks like. The black background is beautiful because those jewel tones just pop right out of it. Just gorgeous. But I will say that the Sea Spray really was like number 2 for me because I love blue and green. Those are 2 of my favorite colors. So it's always a hard choice to make, but you know, if you wanted to make it again, you could. You could be like the other gal that made 3 of them, you know, if you're feeling ambitious. So when you're done though, you'll have a finished quilt and that's always a good thing. So very, very fun. I would love to see what everybody is choosing. I wonder if there's one colorway that's more popular than the other or if they're all just kind of right there together. Karen said she has the black one, so kind of fun. So Noemi said she made a special trip to the store to get her own zipper bags for her sewing room. They're just so handy. I've kind of joked I could get a box of Ziploc bags, put a quilter sticker over the top of it, and charge like double. No, I wouldn't actually do that, but very, very handy. So I'm just seeing if there's any other questions. So Kelly asked, will there be a Quilt-Along for November? So not quite yet. There are other Quilt-Alongs in the works, so you'll probably haven't seen the last of me. Hopefully not. So there'll be some more fun stuff coming. Okay, let's see. I love everybody helping each other out, talking. Oh, of course we have Cindy from Alberta, Canada. Lots of fun. All right. Okay, so good. So Mary Campanelli said she loved making the Flying Dutchman blocks. It went together so smoothly. It's that 4 at a time flying geese that's just genius. I don't know who invented it, but they kind of deserve a medal. To be able to whip up so many, and it just so happens that each block uses 4 of each color. So you can kind of batch the process, which makes it easier. Also helps cut down on losing any of that stuff. All right, so let's see questions that were put on Facebook. This is a great one from Charity. Charity said, "What's the best kept midnight quilt show secret?" I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have any secrets. We're all out there for you to see. I mean, I make a quilt in 10 to 15 minutes. I don't know how long it takes you. I'm just very speedy that way. The best kept secret, it's probably not even a best kept secret, is that I have so much fun doing them. I like to tell everybody that filming episodes or doing the Midnight Quilt Show is a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. So really, by the time we're done, I'm wiped out and I'm super tired. So it doesn't look as exhausting as it is, but kind of hard to keep track of all this stuff. But I have so much fun making them, and I love when I get to travel and hear people talk about it or ask me questions about it. It's a lot of fun. So not a best kept secret, but definitely a good point. And then Stephanie said she tends to stick with safer colors for her quilts. Any tips for branching out to bold colors to make them seem less scary? I love that you would ask me that, Stephanie, because if you knew more about, I love to make quilts with 3 colors. I am such a boring color picker. So gray, blue, and then another color is usually what I'll do. So having made quilts for the Midnight Quilt Show has really made me branch out into different colors, and now I feel a little bit more confident combining colors. Now the best thing to do is to stick with a kit, because a kit will have somebody that's already picked out all the colors. So if we go back to this beautiful quilt we have here, someone's already picked out the perfect shades of blue, the perfect shades of purple, and that really helps because you can see what it's going to look like before you start, but also know like the colors are a little, out of your color preference. Another thing I would do is start small. So if this is a color that's kind of pulling you outside your comfort zone, let's not invest into a whole big king size quilt. Let's do a smaller throw size so that you don't feel so overwhelmed. And when you get done and get all quilted, I bet you're going to love it, because the thing is, then you have a finished quilt. Only other thing I would say about getting adventurous with your color choice would be to use familiar colors and add just an accent color. So this is kind of like wading into the deep end instead of just jumping right in. So let's say that you see that purple is trending and you think you might like purple, but you're not sure, it's kind of out there for you. Pick some other colors that are better for you that you like, and then just add a little accent of purple. That way, if you don't love it, it's just a little bit, no problem. But I should probably take my own advice as well, because I'm not the best at, being adventurous with my color choices, that's for sure. All right, so we're going to go back to the YouTube and see if there's any questions over here. So Chem Crazy just got her kit this afternoon to Ontario, Canada. Fantastic. You have some fun cutting ahead of you. You can always check out the previous check-ins and the videos. It's going to be a good time. Let's see. Oh, so Audrey said, I think this is more of the organizing stuff. She loves putting her finished blocks on the design wall. It helps decorate her sewing room. So that is genius. I actually don't have a design wall in my quilting room, and I thought it's probably about time to get one, especially when I have to clean off the floor, because I'm creative. I've got my piles in different places, and so when I have to clean off my floor, then it would help to just have a design wall to hang it on. And I like the decoration aspect of it as well, so very fun. Pat says, oh, she's on her 3rd quilt, so it's making quilts is kind of like changing diapers. Doing one is a big jump in advancement, so I'm sure you're going to have fun. Oh, so Pat Criswell says, she's new here. Hey, welcome. Is there a kit for the quilt on the table? You are in the right spot. This is the Glorious Dawn Quilt-Along, and you can get the kit, and you can get it for 50% off, and the description about that, or the link to that, is in the description box below. So be sure to check that out. And perfect blueprint just came on there. Oh, Mary, where is my wine? I got it hiding right down here. You can't see it. No, I'm just kidding. In every day, it's a cycle. There's a caffeine to Cabernet cycle, and I'm in the middle of the caffeine cycle. So eventually I'll be getting the glass of wine. So I love that. Okay, good. Cream Puff Creations, what type of thread am I using? Good question. So when it comes to picking out the thread for piecing and quilting, it's completely a personal preference. Now, I will say when I'm piecing and quilting, I like to use like a 50 weight cotton. Craft or Blueprint has the Pima cotton. It's really great. What I love about 50 weight cotton is it just blends into the quilt top. But cotton also makes for a great stitch. So for your seam, it just gives you a nice tight seam, which is important when you're piecing, especially when you have a lot of the stitching and flipping and so on and so forth with this quilt. Now when it comes to quilting, I also like to use the cotton thread, the 50 weight, but if I'm doing a bigger quilt or I really want the thread to blend, I'll do like a 50 weight poly because it will really make it blend in. The question you have to ask yourself is how much do you want the quilting to show up, and does the color contrast with your top? So if I were quilting in the black background and I didn't want the quilting to show up at all, I'm going to use my black thread. And so at that point, it doesn't matter what weight I use because it's not going to be visible anyway. But if I'm using, let's say, a dark gray, then I might go with a thinner weight so it's not too thick on there. But the best way to find out what you like is to try something. And then once you try it, you'll know, do you like it or not? If you don't like it, you can switch to something else, and that's what's great about it. I don't know if I'm saying your name right. Noemi or Naomi. It's just a general question. What type of needle and size do you use for piecing? So the size needle that you use depends on the size of thread that you're using. So for that 50 weight thread, I'm going to use like an 80-12 or 90-14, if I remember that correctly, and that's just going off the top of my head. And so I haven't had that much caffeine today, so I might not be perfectly right on that. But you'll check the needle package and it will tell you exactly what needle to use for what type of thread. I also prefer to use top stitch needles because they're stronger, and the ones that I use are coated, titanium coated, so they're really nice and strong. So when it comes to quilting, especially when you start machine quilting, a good, strong quality needle is going to save you a lot of tension headaches, both literally and figuratively. So it depends on the thread that you're using. Mary says, where can I order the kit? I don't see where you subscribe to ordering a kit. Again, that's in the description box below, or look for a little arrow that says more information. It'll be right down there, or you can go over to myblueprint.com. That's where it's going to be, and so you can check all that out. Okay, Kim, great question. So still sticking with the thread, about thread. See what I did there? It's funny. Sometimes I crack myself up. I can't help it. She's completed lots of quilts, but she gets kind of confused when it comes to the color of thread for the bottom. Do you use different colors? So not only do you have to pick a type of thread and a color of thread for the top, you got to make the same choice for the bottom. And at that point, you're just ready to start quilting, right? You're like, I don't care. For the most part, I like to use the same thread color in the top and bottom. What that does is as I'm moving the quilt around, if I get any of those little pokies or those little threads that are showing, it won't be obvious because they'll be the same color. So this quilt right here, you can kind of look at it, has that black thread. I love it because it doesn't show up on the black. You can kind of see it here a little bit, and I'm not sure what they've done. They've done the same on the back. But they've also used a similar color backing to their quilt top so that the quilting doesn't show on the back. Now when it comes to picking out the thread, if I'm using the same color on the top as the back, if my back was white, that means I would be able to see the black thread on the back. And at that point, I have to kind of ask myself, how do I feel about that? Is that what I like? Now, I like it. I love it when the quilting shows up on the back. It's like getting two for the price of one. It's a bonus. But if you don't like it, pick a busier back or a fabric that matches the top. Now, if you're a newer machine quilter, just trust me on this. Using the same thread color will save you just so much tension headaches. You won't see the little pokies showing up. And I'm speaking to you from experience. I once quilted a quilt that somebody had a hot pink top and a white back, and they wanted the thread to match. So they wanted hot pink on top and white on the back. And have you ever had your brain say, no, no, and then you say, sure, I could do it? Well, I'm sure you can guess what happened, right? You could see the pink on the bottom and the white on the top. It wasn't very fun. So I like to make it match. Now, here's the thing. If you don't want the quilting to show on the back, you kind of have to ask yourself, which side of the quilt do you want to worry about? You can only focus on one side, might as well be the quilt top. So that's my whole theory on thread. But I will say, as much as I like the colors to match, that doesn't mean that the weights or types of thread have to match. Okay, if you're like, hold on, that's just way too much information. I get a little excited about threads because, you know, quilting is my therapy, then threads are my meds. So if you're newer, just use the same thread on top and bottom, but you can experiment with different types of thread. But keeping it the same thread color will just make it a lot easier. So that was a very long answer to a question. You're probably like, never mind, sorry I asked it. So what would you recommend for the sea spray? She bought the thread kit with it. I can't remember, Kelly, the exact colors that come with it. And I'm sure there was like a cream and a blue and maybe a greenish color. It depends on your preferences. And so what you'll do is just take out a bunch of your threads and then just drape them over your quilt and see which one you like the best. Now, when I'm looking at my quilt and I'm picking a thread color, one thing to keep in mind is what do I want to show up and what do I want to not show up. So let's go back, to our quilt down here. The person that made this opted for a black thread, which I think was a really smart choice. If she or he had used a different thread color, it might have showed up way too much on the background, making it too busy. So I think this was a great option. I think there was other options that could be great as well. So the trick is just to kind of lay them out and see what you like. If you want the blocks to really, the quilting to really show up on the blocks and not the background, that means you might want to trade or change thread colors. So that's what's great about the thread kits. You have a lot of different options. So if you're feeling ambitious, you can just match all the threads to the different fabrics, which is probably what I would do, because I think great quilting, kind of highlights the quilt, and so that might be an option as well. So you kind of play around with that. Okay. Kim said, I'm not trying to compete. I quilt to keep my sanity. She has 18 grandchildren. You see 12 daily. So Kim, here's the deal. My mother-in-law, love her to death. She has 9 grandchildren, and she is so proud of all of them. She loves to tell anybody. So if you ever run into her, you'll probably hear about them. And if she hears that anybody has more than her, she likes to mention that, to which I say, hey, I've already had 3 children. I've definitely done my job. But that's amazing, 18 grandchildren. I hear that that's a reward for not killing your children. I'm just saying. Sonia, great question. Have I ever used jersey for the backing to make a bed quilt cuddler? Now, I haven't actually personally quilted with jersey. So jersey is very knit, stretchy. You can definitely quilt with it. It makes a beautiful quilt, but you want to be careful because of that stretch, especially since I do most of my quilts on a long arm. I have a tendency to really tighten that too tight. And then what happens when you take it off, it kind of relaxes and curls in on itself. If you want to do jersey, just keep it nice and loose. You still make your quilt sandwich the same way you would normally if you're quilting on your sewing machine. But another thing you can use is a ballpoint needle. So a ballpoint needle might be helpful because instead of trying to pierce through those fabrics, it's just going to kind of divide it. So that would definitely help you with that jersey and knit. And I think it would be great as a, like you said, a little cuddly blanket, something for comfort, not necessarily warmth. So good question. Oh, perfect. Sean, she said, I used 5 different threads on the Cascade quilt with sea spray, doing all the designs. That's awesome. So 5 different colors. There's a lot of different fabrics in there. Now, if you're listening and you're like, but I don't want to do that, don't worry. That's all just all personal preference. So definitely do what you think would look good. Amanda said, what design would you recommend for a newbie? My grandma taught me before her stroke, so I really want to use that to make her a quilt. Oh, I love that. I learned how to quilt from my grandpa, my husband's grandpa, so special place in our hearts for those. Okay, so if you're talking about quilting designs, like what design is great for a newbie, if you're newer to free motion quilting, I would opt for a design that you already kind of doodle in real life. So let's say you like to just sit on the phone and doodle and you always do leaves or whatever that is. That's what I would start with. If you're like, but I'm not a doodler in life, that's fine. Then I would start with something that's more basic in the number of steps. So when you look at a design, if it has 4 or 5 steps for how it goes together, maybe that's not the best one to start with. But if it has 1 or 2, that might be a good one to start with. So like a loopy meander, maybe even a little bit of a swirl meander. I also like a flower meander. And I don't have any examples to show you, but just look at some, decide which one you want to try it on a little sample for a couple times, and then just put it on your quilt. Because if you use that matching thread color, by the time you get done with the quilt, you'll be an expert at the design, I promise. Another great question, what do I do if I have threads that don't stitch and get a long drag? I have to flip it and cut all the crappy threads out. That's probably pretty much all you can do. So if you get those long threads, you kind of want to get them out of the way so they don't get stuck on anything. So Brenda says she's new. Help! I love it. Succinct and right to the point. Brenda, you go over to my blueprint. It has the pattern, which shows you how to do this step-by-step, the videos, which I highlight the talking points, give you little tips, and then, of course, the check-ins that you can come back and watch for any little tips, or sometimes it's helpful just seeing other people's questions and think, oh, I didn't even think that I would be worried about that. So definitely a good helper. Anne, great point. She says she uses iron-on wash-away stabilizer on jersey, holds it in place while it's quilting, and it's soft and cuddly later after it's washed. Thank you. I never would have guessed that. So that definitely helps. Okay, Kelly, great segue. What block did we do after the Flying Dutchman? So we've just finished the Flying Dutchman. You're right on time, right where you need to be. So next, for this next week, we're going to work on our half square triangles, and we're going to start making our O blocks. So before, I kind of showed you the strip here. Let's kind of revisit that O block. So the O block looks complex, but it's really just some squares and then some half square triangles. So we'll talk about how to make your half square triangles, and then we'll talk about how to assemble them together in the block. So that's going to be your next homework. You know, if you're quilting along and you're kind of wanting to stay on pace, that would be a good one. If you are ahead, that's great. If you're behind or not quite where we're at, no worries. It's not a race. So you can have a fun time with that, Kelly. Okay, so now we've got our homework, our assignment for next time. I'm going to be back here next Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern to answer any questions, to check in and see how you're doing with that O block. So be sure to come back in and visit and let me know if you have any questions, and to subscribe to Blueprint so that you don't miss out on the live check-ins. Subscribe to Blueprint's YouTube channel so you don't miss any of the live check-ins. Thank you so much for joining me for another fun half an hour. I was just thinking, getting to come on here makes Mondays so much bearable, so much more bearable. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. And until then, happy quilting.